down. And then he started seeing people all around him getting shot and falling down. And they've got a guy in custody now who apparently emptied 3 clips from a pistol into these folks. And when he was done, he sat down. And then somebody took him into custody. And now we're checking to see. They thought that was it. And now somebody had reports of shots fired in a nearby parking garage. So we'll continue to monitor that. Just wanted to bring you up to date with the latest that we had at this point. It appears the airport is completely shut down. All of the terminals, all the aircraft parked on the runways. Nobody's getting in or out of Fort Lauderdale at the moment. Back to a local issue here. And, of course, the legislature's in session again in Missouri. One of the things they'll be looking at this year is education reform. What spurred that? Well, we don't have to go very far to find that. How about the mess that we've seen in Columbia at the University of Missouri just in the last year or so? A lot of people are saying, hey, wait a minute. Let's rethink how we're doing this. Not just because of the racial strife down there, but for a lot of reasons. Cost overruns and, the increasing cost of higher education. The folks at the Show Me Institute, of course, have been looking at this. Michael Highsmith is here with us today from the Show Me Institute. And you've got a piece on your website now that I know that you put together along with Michael McShane with examples of how other people have handled this education reform, maybe a conglomeration of those ideas and something we may be able to look at in Missouri.
Yeah, just like you said, Mark. So this isn't even just a local problem. We've had a lot of issues with Mizzou, and we want to take a step back and look at how we can, what areas of reform are available to make this kind of thing easier to go forward with. But this isn't just in Mizzou. This isn't just in Missouri. Student debt is a issue that's taking place nationwide. If you look at the aggregate sum, you have over $1.2 trillion in student debt right now, and just to put that in reference, that's more than all credit card debt in the entire nation. So
wow.
It's a staggering number, and a lot of students, we had 7 million, the Wall Street Journal reported 7 million students defaulted on their loans last year. So,
well, if you walk out of Mizzou, what is it, $24,000 a year, something like that, after 4 years, you've had to borrow money the whole time, you've got $100,000 in debt, and then the interest starts after 6 months after you graduate, right, or something like that. And then you've only walked out with either a business degree or maybe a teaching degree, and you start a job for $35,000 or $40,000 a year. That's a crushing amount of debt to have hanging over your head.
Exactly, and it's a huge issue for a lot of students. Is if you graduate and you don't have the wage premium that you expected, you're not making as much money compared to a high school graduate as you hoped to pay off that debt. And so what we did is this paper that Michael McShane, our Director of Education Policy, and I wrote. We looked at a couple different case studies for Purdue, schools in Texas, University of Chicago, and we looked at different reforms that they've implemented in order to make school, A, more affordable, B, more rigorous, and C, make sure that what you're learning is relevant and can be applied to the outside world.
So I love Texas in general. Mm-hmm. Governor Perry has tried something down there. What is it?
Yeah, he issued a pretty significant challenge to all schools in Texas. He wanted to develop a $10,000 degree so that you could graduate with just $10,000 as your total cost. And that's definitely not what the typical college costs right now. So that's a pretty serious challenge. But it's actually happened. A couple schools have come together. Texas A&M launched the Affordable Baccalaureate program. And so there's something that they use called competency-based education. And what that is it's an accreditation system. So rather than spending a whole semester and sitting in a class 15 weeks and then getting credit for a subject, once you've learned that subject, you gain credit for it and you can move on to the next subject. So it's basically a way of it's a way of treating those students who are able to learn things quicker. They can pick up on something instead of holding them back for an extra couple weeks in a classroom. They can move on quicker. They can get out of college quicker. They have a smaller bill, and they're in the workforce quicker.
All right. What are some of the other ideas?
Yeah, so that's basically shrinking down how long your time in college is, and thereby reducing the cost. But what Purdue does, actually, they launched something called an income share agreement, which isn't a new idea. This is something Milton Friedman came up with many decades ago, but it's just now being implemented on a large scale. So what an income share agreement is, it's how you can help finance school. So rather than just taking out a loan and having a set amount of money that you have to pay back, you can take out a loan either from the school or from another investor, and then you pay a certain percentage of your income for X amount of years. That way, so what this does is it really provides an incentive for the school to have a vested interest on how students do, because naturally the more income a student has, the more money the school is making back to further this program. And additionally, if a student finds themselves dropping out of college after 2 years, instead of being buried by $50,000 of student debt and no income to take care of it, because it's a percentage of their income, they're not suffering quite as much.
Right. The amount of increase you see in tuition year to year, it certainly doesn't seem to match cost of living increases or anything. It's always considerably higher. So is there an angle there to approach this from?
Yeah, that's certainly an issue right now. And you look at the past decade for the average tuition prices, and they've gone up roughly 60% over the past decade, which is 3 times the speed of inflation. So it's running out of control, and a lot of students are being forced to default on their loans because they can't afford this cost of living adjustment.
Is education reform something we're likely to see come out of Jeff City this year? Do we know that?
I don't know for sure, but I would certainly hope that this is something at the forefront. It's an issue that it's not a looming crisis. It's something that's upon us right now, and we absolutely need to address it.
Well, and even in this last election cycle, you see the 2 populist candidates coming out offering free college.
Right.
Well, nothing's free. We have a free zoo here, but it's not free. Somebody's paying for it, and I'm will always fight against that approach to taking care of this problem by just pushing the expense off on somebody else. We've got to get to the root of the problem.
Right. And the bottom line is college has to be paid for in some way. But the important thing is that college is bringing something to the table, and that when a student pays to go to college, they're not just hung out to dry with a high school education or whatever education that can't help them in the workforce. So what this comes, we need to look at college. We need to further studies to make sure that that the education is relevant enough that it's actually getting you set up for a job in the workforce, and you're going to have a higher income, and you can actually pay the debt. So what Purdue did is they launched the Purdue Gallup Index, where they're looking at over 60,000 graduates over the past couple decades and seeing where they stand in where